In that time, when the God Emperor walked amongst his sons, clad in golden raiment, then was the name of Sigismund given unto greatness. For Sigismund was close within the councils of Dorn the Jean Sire, who was foremost in might amongst all the God Emperor's sons, guardian of the blessed bastion of holy terror against the perfidy of the arch-traitor. And Sigismund was named the Emperor's champion, and did stand in guardianship over his legion's most holy site, and did command those Templars who had proven themselves most faithful and devout amongst all the Primarch's blessed sons. About themselves they bound the chains of willing and pious devotion. Through a time of darkest heresy they fought, and ever did the light of the true faith blaze from within them, that they might turn back to darkness. And then it was that the Emperor chose his time of ascension to the Golden Throne, for he knew that his realm would ever be safe in their keeping. Now came a second time of testing, for the Emperor's loyal sons stood in opposition and in doubt. In that time did Dorn the Jean Sire become the anvil of tempering upon which each of his brothers was tested, and, in the fullness of time, even Guilliman the Divisive was proven sound of faith, such that mighty Dorn was moved to suffer his brother's will. And in this age did Dorn the Jean Sire see fit also to test his most favoured sons, and did Sigismund step boldly forth, and about him came also the most pious and the most mighty of the imperial fists, that they might carry the Emperor's light unto even the most benighted corners of the darkling void as his Black Templars. And now was Sigismund named as High Marshal, and did he offer his sacred vow to bear the Emperor's holy truth upon his eternal crusade, and by the certainty of its scripture he would punish the sinful, the heretical, and the tainted in his righteousness and his wrath. Purity. Purity of mind, purity of body, purity of purpose, purity of deed. Of all the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, we are the pure. We scour the galaxy on our eternal crusade. We are the Emperor's most holy scions. We are his rage. We are his judgment. We are his vengeance. We are the last vestige of the original goal, the last hope for his eternal crusade. For we have never bowed to any, never bent the knee, never given up on his holy vision, his dream of a unified, conquered, pacified galaxy. The dream of the Imperium of Man. A hegemony that will last forever. A place of happiness, safety, and above all else, a realm of purity. A human galaxy for the human race. A dream worth fighting for. A dream worth dying for. We, the Astartes, are his greatest, most pure creation. We are his warriors. We carry his genes in our very bodies, through his sons, his Primarchs, through Rogel Dorn, the greatest of them all. We are his very blood. Thus are we closest to his divine will, arbiters of his judgment. knowers of his purpose, far more than even the Inquisitors who hold his seal. For we are the Black Templars. We do not wear his sigil, we carry no seals, for we are his symbol, us, eternally. And we crush all foes of his grand plan, his sublime vision, his perfect universe. For not all enemies are from without. Sometimes they come from within. Dressed in our colours, daubed with our markings they came, the reinforcement sent by the great manipulator, Guilliman. A gift, he says, a sign of respect. At first, I saw these new things, these larger, faster, tougher Marines. I was shocked, as were we all, but not for the reasons they must have surmised. They must have believed our shock was at their power, at their splendour, their abilities, their new weaponry. But no, it was far deeper than that. For I have looked into the eyes of greenskins who dwarf me. I have seen weapons used against us that could vaporize entire Crusader squads in the blink of an eye. I have engaged rampaging beasts the size of hab blocks. We were not in awe. We were certainly not afeared, intimidated, or impressed. We were revolted. Aye, to the depths of our very cores. Somehow, they had felt it apt to tinker with that which was made by his infallible, ineffable hand. They sought to second-guess and supplant the mighty deed that our God Emperor performed. The High Lords, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, the Tech Wizards of Mars, they conspired to replace us, the most pure, with these things. These abominations, these ghouls, these hulks of corrupted transhuman flesh. They sought to change perfection, to mar its purity, our purity. And so, when our chaplains thundered, my ears hearkened, my heart opened. I let those words in, washing through my sinews, filling my senses. I knew what was expected. I relished the opportunity to cleanse and purify. I took my holy sword, anointed by my God, and struck down the wolves amongst our flock. Despite their size and speed and sinew, they were like hapless ultramarines. They fought mechanically and predictably. They fought at a disadvantage, as they wore the colours, but they did not carry them in their heart. They did not know our ways. They did not know our words. No pity, no remorse, no fear. And my experienced skills made light work of them, as with my brothers, slicing them, sinking my sword into them up to the hilt. We killed them, the Primaris. We killed them all. And when the deed was done, we all felt cleaner. We all felt righteous. And no princeps, Magos, High Lord, or even Primarch will ever tell me what we did was wrong. For if the Emperor took truck with our actions, he would strike us down. But he hath not. He will not. For we are his anger. We are his vengeance. We are his symbol. We are his Black Templars. Welcome, gentle listener, I am Voldemort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the factions, forces, and formations of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. And today, we shall be returning to one of the most controversial chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines. With zeal beyond the ken of people of our time, they are fanatics of unquenchable fire and fervour, and are rightly feared by every faction that would oppose the righteous galactic domination of the Emperor of Mankind. Of course, I can only be speaking of the most aggressive of the Sons of Dawn, the Sons of Rogel, the legendary Black Templars. Now, I have already created some videos on this terrifying sect of Space Marines, for they cannot be called a chapter alone in all honesty. Although rather old and perhaps a tad dated, the original Black Templars videos contain the basics on this most pious of all Space Marine organizations. So do check that if you are unaware of its contents, the beginnings, the history of the Black Templars. It has been some time since we discussed them in length, and the new codex of the 9th edition of the game has introduced more Crusades and other details, so I felt an update was in order. Now, let us hear from the horse's mouth, so to put it, exactly how the Black Templars have adjusted in the Era Indomitus. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, the Era Indomitus. It is a bloody and horrific time of trial, such as the Imperium of Mankind has not witnessed in many thousands of years. In this dark hour, the Black Templars see heresy and faithlessness all around them, and have redoubled their efforts to purge the unclean from the God Emperor's realm. When the Great Rift tore the Imperium in two, the Black Templars were already scattered from one end of the galaxy to the other. Marshal Verbeck's Immortaria Crusade had pushed as far out into the darkness as the Molech Belt, while the Oparian and Gaidos Crusades were last reported variously amidst the Ghoul stars and upon the eastern fringe. Other Crusades carved paths of fire across the Ultima Segmentum, and the Segmentums Tempestus and Obscurus, and even the Segmentum Solar. Then catastrophe, and, in its wake, the malevolent shadow of the Noctis Aeterna. By the time the veil began to lift, and the light of the Astronomicon shone out anew, several Crusades had vanished altogether. Only High Marshal Hellbrecht had absolute faith that the lost Crusades fought on through the benighted wilderness of the Imperium Nihilus. Whether this conviction stemmed purely from belief or had its foundation in some secret knowledge, he did not say. Even those Crusades still at large within the Imperium Sanctus were scattered. Many had been in war transit when the Great Rift opened. They had been hurled light years off course by the raging empiric tumult that followed, and in some cases badly mauled. In the face of such disaster, many Space Marine chapters would have sought to consolidate their strength, yet as the poisonous tide of the Noctis Aeterna rolled back, it left the Imperium Sanctus strewn with a flotsam of heresy, mutation and rebellion no Black Templar could abide. This was no time for what they saw as the cowardice of compromise, no hour for retreat. Wherever the light of the Imperial faith guttered, the Black Templars believed that it fell to them to fan the flames anew. Surviving Crusades redoubled their efforts, fighting with unstinting zeal to purge corrupted Imperial worlds and to punish those whose faith had failed them during the time of darkness. Long-abandoned chapter keeps were brought back into service, and new ones raised, often built upon the sundered rubble of toppled traitor strongholds. Where the curse of witchery proliferated, there the Black Templars were especially wrathful. In war zones such as Talidus, Hochheim II, and the Cyan Stars, the chapter were as much a terror to loyalist forces as to heretics when psychic mutations were discovered amongst the Imperial ranks. Due to their unrelenting aggression and scattered dispositions, it was no easy task for the torchbearers of the Indomitus Crusade to find the Black Templars and deliver the Primarch's miracle to them. Furthermore, of all the Space Marine chapters at large in the galaxy, the openly fanatical Black Templars were deemed amongst the most temperamentally unpredictable in how they would react to this revelation. For these and other reasons, Primarch Roboute Guilliman sought out High Marshal Hellbrecht and led a deputation aboard the Eternal Crusader to speak to him directly. Guilliman rightly believed that the High Marshal acted as both the mind and the heart of the Black Templars. Successfully introduce Call's miracle here, and it would have a far better chance of being circulated, like combat stims around a body, than if his messengers chased the scattered Crusades across the war-torn galaxy individually. Hellbrecht was set upon his pursuit of Gazgul Mag Ugruk Thraka when Guilliman came to him. The High Marshal received the Primarch with respect bordering upon veneration, for here was a gene son of the holy God Emperor himself. Yet at the same time, Hellbrecht chafed at the delay, believing that Thraka slipped further from his grasp every day. Furthermore, chapter scripture made no bones of Guilliman and Dorn's troubled relationship. Part of the High Marshal could not help but suspect that here was his gene-sire's divisive brother, come again after millennia to shackle Dorn's most fervent sons, as he had been unable to do before. Hellbrecht was no fool. He knew how divergent his chapter's practices and beliefs were. If Guilliman wished to censure the Black Templars, he will not struggle to find apparent grounds. In the end, the meeting went differently than either party was expecting. Roboute Guilliman was surprised at the willingness with which Hellbrecht recognized the value of the Primarch's tech, even if he attributed a spark of divinity to it that made the Ultramarines' Primarch uncomfortable. By comparison, Guilliman did not turn out to be the despot that Hellbrecht expected. The Primarch did not command the Black Templars to do other than that which their nature demanded, though he and Hellbrecht did clash over the matter of Gazgul. In the end, a compromise was wrought between them. Guilliman reminded Hellbrecht of the oaths he had sworn, and of how his duty as High Marshal was to all the Emperor's realm, rather than just being to his own vendettas. Shamed, Hellbrecht promoted a number of his most seasoned sword brethren to the rank of Marshal, and bade them muster new Crusades, into whose ranks the Black Templar Primaris Greyshields were mingled. These Crusades were oath-sworn to aid all those worlds of the Ecclesiarchy that lay in peril along the border of the Great Rift. This duty done, Hellbrecht himself renewed his vow to pursue Gazgul Magorok Thraka to the ends of the Emperor's realm, and continued his quest. The widespread galactic disruption of the Era Indomitus, coupled with rapacious recruiting amongst the Crusades, has left the Black Templars' numbers even more in question than before. The High Marshal's seal, set to the Primaris miracle, has done much to encourage its adoption amongst the Crusade fleets. Yet some particularly conservative marshals maintain a mistrust of what they see as borderline heretical tinkering with the Emperor's work. Others have simply outpaced their potential reinforcements thus far, fighting on across far-flung reaches of the Imperium, entirely ignorant of the powerful assets they could have added to their ranks. There has been some talk that the Black Templars have proven especially resilient during the crossing of the Rubicon Primaris, and that it may be a reward for their unwavering faith in the God Emperor. Equally, of course, this could be confirmed bias or baseless rumor at work. The one certainty in this bloody new age is that the Black Templars fight on as they always have, seeking the heretic, the mutant, the witch, and the traitor, wherever they may be found. And, whether alongside the forces of the Indomitus Crusade, or fighting alone, purging them without mercy. Seek not for answers, not for understanding nor enlightenment. Find strength instead in your faith and in your hatred, and so be content. The Purges Crusade. Words are the tools of the heretic, accepting only those uttered with vengeance. Words are the tools of the heretic, accepting only those uttered with vehement and utmost faith. With deed and honour, the faith speak the plainest truths. The Purges Crusade was among those dispatched by Hellbrecht to aid the ecclesiastical holdings along the fringe of the Great Rift. Its warriors, anticipating battling the heretic servants of the arch-enemy, for surely it would be they who most threatened the God Emperor's faithful. Yet other foes also covered the Emperor's realm. The Vatrika subsector lies in a forward reach of the Ultima Segmentum. Much of the subsector is racked by bizarre graphitic anomalies. Thus it is named for its only habitable system, Vatrika. Imperial settlers had first claimed its worlds after finding abandoned and highly technological mine workings of a mysterious nature laced throughout the system. After critical examination, adepts of the Martian priesthood deemed the workings divergent from, but not wholly dissimilar to, human machineries. They were as surprised as anyone to discover no trace of xeno-heresy, and to proffer their blessing that the Vatrican colonists could reawaken and employ their ancient devices. It was a decision that benefited the Vatrican greatly. Their newly acquired mines extracted more than simple ores, allowing them to harvest ultra-rare elements and crystal structures from the molten cores of several planets, and to skim molecular nitro-dispoxide from the rings of the system's gas giant. They even found deposits of blackstone. This interested the Adeptus Mechanicus greatly, but before the Martian magi could sink their claws into the system, the ecclesiarchy got there first. An influx of missionaries preceded the great works of Saint Bustiphus, the Builder, who saw cathedral and shrines of the Imperial Creed raised on every Vatrican world. The Adeptus Mechanicus were ousted from the system they had planned to exploit, and the ecclesiarchy installed itself in their place. That which made Vatrika rich also proved its doom. Whatever beings had mined the system before humanity, the mystery of their vanishing remained an unsettling question amongst the Vatrican people. When the answer at last came amidst the gloom of the Noctis Aeterna, it proved deeply unwelcome. Whether in the response to Vatrican mining efforts, responding to their own anti-chaos protocols, or some combination of the two, Necron tomb complexes awoke deep beneath the surfaces of the worlds Vatrika Primus and Vatrika Quintus. Legions of Sardakan dynasty marched in eerie lockstep from the Stygian depths. Fortress-sized weapons platforms rumbled up from below, shedding the shattered remains of human settlements before unleashing cosmic forces to blast Imperial Navy ships to glowing embers. Ghastly war engines hovered through the blasted ruins of once proud shrine cities, driving the outmatched forces of the Astra Militarum before them. An astropathic distress call was flung into the ether, but even this was only thanks to time bought through the self-sacrifice of Canis Amaleka's sisters of the Golden Thorn. It seemed as though the Necrons and their overlord, Tartarek the Scourge, would conquer all human resistance in the system and be free to harvest the survivors for experimentation at will. Responding to the astropathic distress call, Marshal Holger's Purges Crusade entered the system in time to intervene. The Black Templars were initially surprised, for they had expected to face a heretic foe so close to the abhorrent mass of the Great Rift. Confronted instead by the well-ordered and numerous Necrons, they were forced to adjust their battle plans swiftly. Marshal Holger was a great believer in the swift and overwhelming strike from on high. Thus, he brought all of his forces together against a single location, the Macrocathedrum of the Emperor's eternal glory, upon Vatrika Primus. Here the enemy had toppled the system's capital and raised their own amidst the ruins. Here, vowed Holger, the purge would commence. Waves of drop pods and hammer-felled bunkers screamed down through the atmosphere, escorted into battle by plummeting squads of Inceptors and wings of black-armored fighter craft. Heavier gunships came after them, carrying chanting masses of Black Templars within their holds. Looming vast above the drop of salt, the strike cruisers, unmerciful and divine mandate, skimmed as low through the planet's atmosphere as their crews dared, in order to deliver thunderous supporting bombardments against the enemy's anti-aircraft batteries. Still, some of the Black Templars never made the ground. Xenos fighting craft whipped back and forth through their formations, guns blazing. Arcs of emerald lightning reached up to swat dropships from the skies. Yet the fury of the Black Templars could not be denied. 4 sizable fighting companies made it to the ground despite their casualties, their infantry elements storming unstoppably into the Xenos lines even before their armoured support had fully deployed to aid them. Knowing that the unrestrained fury of his followers could be both boon and weakness, Marshal Holger gathered his sword brethren and spearheaded the push towards the towering Xenos ziggurat that had been the target of the orbital attack. Recovering from the initial shock of the invasion, the Necrons' ranks grew thicker and the resistance better coordinated by the minute. Many strange beings appeared amongst their formations, beings that wielded powers so akin to witchcraft that it drove the Black Templars to still greater heights of fury. So it was that with Holger leading their charge and bellowing oaths of eternal hatred, the Purges Crusade crashed through the enemy's rear lines and broke upon their unholy fane. They found Overlord Tartarek and his closest advisors already gone, having prudently fled through Dolmen Gates to avoid the Black Templars' vengeance. Yet the ancient warlord had not quit the war, only the battle. Marshalling his strength anew on Vatrika Quintus, he prepared to strike back against the Imperial foes. Bleak inspiration. Though it numbered several hundred space marines, supported by tanks, dreadnoughts, combat aircraft, and even fearsome void ships, the Purges Crusade was a small force when set against the enormity of an entire planetary system. Moreover, the Necrons controlled a series of dimensional gates that allowed them to ferry their legions instantaneously from one world to another. After his victory at the Macrocathedrum of the Emperor's Eternal Glory, Marshal Holger was forced to break his fighting companies down into small forces, so as to prosecute a war on many fronts. The Black Templars were not daunted by this. They knew with absolute certainty that they fought in the sight of the God Emperor, and that while he looked down upon them, they could not know defeat. Violent clashes erupted across Vatrika Primus, Secundus, and Quartus, Crusader squads smashing through battle lines of android warriors, sword brethren dueling with hulking Lich Guard. There were victories and defeats on both sides at a battlefield level, but after several months' grueling conflict, it could not be denied that the Necrons were winning the wider strategic campaign. Undaunted by their losses, the Black Templars continued to fight on every front, but they also took the time to purge the feudal Vatrican enclaves of those who had succumbed to psychic mutation or heresy. To Holger's forces, this was as great a strategic necessity as prosecuting the Xenos foe, for no taint could be permitted amongst the Emperor's flock. As it turned out, their very uncompromising brutality worked in the Black Templars' favour. The superstitious Vatrican people saw the Emperor's angels not only doing battle with the Xenos abominations that had invaded their worlds, but also cleansing their own populations. It was not long before fanatical preachers screamed in the streets that the God Emperor was watching, that the Vatricans had been blessed by the coming of the Black Templars and the purging of their sins so they could fight back. Soon enough, volunteer militias formed around the shattered cores of Astra Militarum regiments. Wild-eyed zealots packed out their ranks, making up for a lack of training or high-end equipment with hatred and ferocity. These Vatrican faithsworn, as the ad hoc regiments became known, surged into battle alongside the Black Templars in great number. The Space Marines, for their part, recognized the value of these flagellant hordes in bogging down the Necrons and cancelling out their numerical advantage. Casualties amongst the Faithsworn were horrific, but this mattered little to the Emperor's loyal warriors. So long as the tide of chanting rabble continued to tie up the Xenos forces and allow the Black Templars to retake the initiative, then the God Emperor would doubtless welcome their noble martyrdoms. The Heimdall Crusade. Indomitus Crusade fleet Secundus treads a bloody path. To them falls the duty of walking the martyr's road into the teeth of the Eye of Terror, executing a costly counterpunch against a heretic foe. Amongst their selfless ranks are the mighty Black Templars of the Heimdall Crusade. Marshal Gaydon and his Black Templars were amongst the myriad forces drawn into the muster of the Indomitus Crusade fleet. From the first, Gaydon held the firm belief that Roboute Guilliman was a divine embodiment of the Emperor's will, sent to lead the Imperium through its greatest time of trial. Thus he was only too pleased to offer his crusade strength to the Primarch's muster. He was also glad to accept assignment to Indomitus Crusade fleet Secundus. No bones were made about the perilous nature of Secundus's mission, nor that the cost in martyred Imperial heroes might well eventually run to every last warrior and war engine that made up the fleet. To Gaydon, fleet Secundus's cause seemed the most virtuous and righteous of them all, a headlong charge directly into the teeth of the arch-enemy, seeking to break through all barriers set before them and come into the very borders of the Eye of Terror. There was little hope that such a quest would see the sundered Cadian gates restored, and none that Abaddon's host could somehow be forced back into exile in the Eye. Instead, it was hoped that so brazen a challenge could not be ignored by the worshippers of the Dark Gods. The heretics would surely answer it in kind. Crusade Command hoped that Fleet Secundus would draw heretic forces away from other, more strategically crucial war zones and allow fleets Primus, Tertius, Quartus and Quintus and Sextus the opportunity to reclaim the Imperium Sanctus. Gaydon's Heimdall Crusade was gratefully received into the ranks of Fleet Secundus for two reasons. In the first instance, it was a sizable force that boasted a battle barge and 4 strike cruisers, themselves transporting no fewer than 5 fighting companies and over 150 Black Templar battle tanks. The second reason was one of faith. The Order of the Ebon Chalice, the Order of Our Martyred Lady, and the Order of the Bloody Rose all had strong contingents within Fleet Secundus, while the dozens of Astra Militarum regiments that bolstered its strength had been selected by the Officio Logisticarum for notable zealotry. Other Space Marine chapters contributed strike forces to Fleet Secundus, but to the fanatical masses, it was seen as a particular blessing to be joined by the God Emperor's most openly faithful chapter. So talismanic was the Black Templars' presence that at least one squad of these warriors was requested to join every single battle group within Fleet Secundus. Gaydon himself assigned a full squad of his sword brethren to act as an honour guard to Fleet Master Rasmartin Orithadius Samuel, and they travelled thereafter aboard the Fleet Master's flagship, the Thunder's Peal. The main strength of the Heimdall Crusade stayed together, however, forming the backbone of the fleet's battle group, Erastus. They were joined by missions of the Orders of Our Martyred Lady and the Bloody Rose, as well as a lance of House Fidelitor Knights and 6 regiments of Barthusian armoured auxilia. All told, this group was amongst the most powerful in the entire Crusade fleet. It soon came to be known as Samuel's Hammer, earning the epithet in a series of crushing victories through the corrupted wars of the Caspitar Belt and the Umar Hep cluster. The Black Templars' armoured fury and the indomitable faith of the Adeptus Astartes made for a potent battlefield combination that saw countless heretics slain and witches burned. Often led in by knights of House Fidelitor, the combined armoured spearheads of the Black Templars, the Battle Sisters, and the Barthusian Leman Russ squadrons proved nigh unstoppable. They rolled over the barricades on Wormwex, shattered the supposedly unbreakable lines of the Blood Deacon's Golemites, and brought fire and purgation to the heart of the Hedothian Spire. Each of these victories came at a bloody price, but such pious self-sacrifice was embraced by those who fought in Marshal Gaydon's shadow. All of these conquests paled when set against the battle for Vastorax, however. Here, a rogue psyker of terrifying power had set himself up as Witch Empress and had enthralled the minds of every last living being that inhabited the huge industrial world. Moreover, several sizable warbands of heretic Astartes had come to reinforce Vastoras' defences. As Crusade Command had hoped, the ferocious onslaught of Fleet Secundus was beginning to attract champions of chaos, keen to prove themselves by being the ones to halt the Loyalist advance. Yet the heretics were not the only ones receiving reinforcements. Mere days before the Loyalist assault was due to plunge down upon the fortifications of Vastoras, a mighty warship named the Martyr's Halo emerged from the turbulent warp to join the fight. Aboard it travelled battle sisters of the Argent Shroud, and at their head none other than Abbess Sanctorum Morven Val herself. Val was moving between the Crusade fleets as the Emperor's will guided her, and now she came to lend her might to the battle for Vastoras. Marshal Gaydon declared her arrival the ultimate sign of the God Emperor's favour, and, between them, he and Abbess Val led the assault against the Witch Empress's world. The campaign that followed was a long and bloody one, and made martyrs and saints beyond count. The Witch Empress's hordes fought without fear or concern for their own lives. Driven mindlessly forward by her will, they swarmed the Imperial forces in their hundreds of thousands, while the heretic Astartes dug in tenaciously or surged forth to battle as their natures dictated. Around the Tanguvestra spaceport, the Black Templars drove one armoured spearhead after another into the cunningly laid defence lines of the Iron Warriors, and suffered great losses before at last they broke through. The Emperor's champion rose amongst their ranks in time for the assault upon the Northern Loth Bridge, charging in alongside Abbess Val and her guard of Paragon warriors to meet the World Eater's onslaught. More than 70 Black Templar battle tanks formed the core of the massed Imperial armoured push through the hellish Jolvos wilds. The twisted forest burned as the Loyalists forced their way through ambushes, tank traps, hidden bunker lines and Black Legion counter-offensives that cost them dear. Castellan Ozic and Chaplain Girmer fell during that furious conflict, dying alongside Canoness Larenta of our martyred lady, in order to finally halt the rampages of the monstrous Nightmare Engine. After months of hideous conflict and catastrophic losses, the elite armoured punch of Samuel's hammer finally shattered the fortifications around the Witch Empress's palace. At the last, Marshal Gaydon and the Emperor's champion stood shoulder to shoulder with Abbess Val, Canoness Danicia of the Bloody Rose, and Baron Munstis of House Fidelitor, against the Witch Empress and her demonic patrons. It was an epic duel that raged for a day and a night, and brought great sections of the palace itself crashing down. Yet in the end, the Witch Empress was defeated and victory at last claimed by the Loyalists. Without the psychic lash of their ruler to keep them fighting, the enslaved hordes collapsed into rout and damnation, while the last heretic Astartes quit the field rather than fight on against impossible odds. So triumphed the zeal of the God Emperor's servants over the dark manipulations of the Chaos Guards on Vastoras. Let them hear the roar of our engines, and the roiling thunder of our battle hymns. Let them see the zeal upon our faces, the unwavering fury in our eyes, the keen edges of our blades. Let them feel the heat of the flames we turn upon them, and smell the flesh of their heathen comrades burn. Let them know that they are next. Let them know that their judgment is upon them, and that the God Emperor has no mercy for their kind. Marshal Maxim, the Charybdis Campaign. the Tan Helm Crusade. Guided by Emperor-sent visions, Marshal Maxim gathered the Tan Helm Crusade and made for the Charybdis Nebula. The object of his quest was the lost blade of Leonhard, a noble emperor's champion who had fallen in battle against heathen witches. The Tan Helm Crusade would recover this precious relic, or die in the attempt. The words of the God Emperor came to Marshal Maxim as he meditated in his Spartan cell. Their meaning was unequivocal, as was their urging to haste. Yet Maxim was noted amongst his fellow marshals for his great strategic and spiritual wisdom. Poring over charts and passages of lore in the Scriptorium of Truth, Maxim discovered that the Charybdis Nebula held dark secrets. There were numerous tales of the perfidious Eldari attached to the region, but worse was revealed as Maxim read on. Magnus the Red, demon Primarch of the Thousand Suns, was a figure spoken of with such hatred in the Black Templar scriptures that the words seemed almost to burst into flame upon the page. Recent texts asserted that the one-eyed demon prince had fashioned a perverse and unnatural kingdom within a conquered swathe of the Emperor's realm, and that the Charybdis Nebula lay upon its fringes. Leonhard had, it seemed, been part of the ill-fated Vaughan Crusade that had sought to track down and slay the demon Primarch in the God Emperor's name. Forewarned of the sorcerous nature of his enemies, Marshal Maxim assembled an elite force of Black Templars, including an unusually great number of those with the temperament for ranged warfare. If his crusade were to face against great numbers of alien or heretic witches, he would require the furious fire support of Hellblasters, Devastators, and the like, to prevent his crusade squads being picked apart by sorcerous means before they could bring the fight to the foe. He also recruited many chaplains to his cause. The Eldari were known for their insidious illusions and duplicity. The Thousand Suns, for their part, were reviled for sorcerous manipulation. Marshal Maxim was determined that his warriors' minds and souls would be girded against even the most cunning machinations of whatever enemies they might meet. The chaplains would ensure that the crusade remained true to its purpose, no matter what trials were laid before them. Most unusually of all, Maxim visited the prison-like quarters within which the Black Templars' navigators were held. These three-eyed mutants were held in high esteem on Terra, and throughout the wider Imperium were feared and prized for their ability to read the currents of the warp, and to guide void ships along these currents. The Black Templars make use of navigators for these purposes, for there is no other way to traverse the vast distance across which the Imperium is scattered. Yet even such sanctioned psycho mutants as navigators and astropaths are barely tolerated by the Black Templars, and treated as little better than slaves or prisoners. None but Maxim's sword brethren knew what passed between the Marshal and the wary navigators during his audience, but when he emerged, no less than 4 of the powerful mutants walked behind him, and were escorted hurriedly to his waiting strike cruiser by their harried-looking bodyguards. The chaplains of Maxim's mustered crusade questioned his actions keenly, for their hatred of witches was especially strong. Yet Maxim would say only that he acted as the God Emperor bade him, and nothing more. The Questers rode. Travelling aboard their strike cruiser, the Lightbearer, the Tan Helm Crusade met many dangers. In the Urkarai Strait, while halted to take astrogatial bearings, the ship was assailed by orc pirates and boarded. Marshal Maxim led a furious counter-offensive that repulsed the Greenskins. He boarded their flagship and scuttled it, but not before finding strange hints upon the bridge that the orcs had been purposefully directed against the Lightbearer by some shadowy third party. Then came an attack as they sailed the tumultuous warp. A host of demonic entities somehow broke through the barrier of the ship's Geller field and wrought havoc. During this fighting, a gruesome being fashioned from crystal and living fire broke into the navigator's sanctum, immolating the navigator even as he tried to bring the Lightbearer back into real space. The ship would have been lost to the tides of the warp forever except for Marshal Maxim's foresight in bringing some of the precious mutants with him. Another navigator took over the duties of her fallen comrade and, while Maxim and his chaplains led a heroic holding action, she dragged the strike cruiser through the veil and into real space, banishing the demons in the process. Even once they reached the Charybdis Nebula, still it seemed as though warring forces bent their wills against the Tan Helm Crusade. Eldari hosts struck, slaying and fading as though they already knew where and how the Black Templars would fight. Strange phenomena warped the passage of time and the Black Templars' perception of reality. It soon became clear that both the Eldari and the worshippers of Tzeentch sought to prevent them from reaching their goal. Yet the Tan Helm Crusade forged on through one battle after another, drawing closer to the lost blade of Leinhardt with every victory. End quote. Now the entry itself does not contain the details that I attempted to reflect in the story at the beginning of this entry, for they come from one of the newest books in the Black Library. Woo! Throne of Light. And oh, how I look forward to getting into it when I have the time, hopefully soon. But it clearly shows the disparity in what was expected by the High Marshal Hellbrecht and the Primarch Roboute Guilliman. For perhaps Guilliman expected the Sons of Dawn to be as straight-laced as they were in his time, as compliant? And perhaps the High Marshal is losing his edge. For he actually believed that his many crusades would take to these new Marines at his word alone, that they would see his perspective, even if they had not received his call to arms and orders to accept the creations of Khorne. But this has not proven to be correct in one instance at least, for one of the Crusades. But perhaps it was just the one crusade, the one massacre. Perhaps it was not. And only time will tell. I have been Voldemort, your faithful servant. If you are intent on gaining any figures, then do please consider getting a discount and using one of our affiliate links in the description, as that helps us out at the guides. So, a good deed while filling a need, so to put it. And do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then please hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. There is, of course, a Discord and merch link in the description as well. Also, do check out a Kickstarter, Amulet of Thrayax, a cutthroat board game that is being done by a friend of the channel. Kickstarter, that kind of thing. Links in the description again. It could be jolly and maybe worth a look, and the intro video is very funny indeed, so go give it a shufty. And of course, thank you for listening. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.